All right, hello Fellowship Bible Church. This is another testimony video that I'm doing with Jensen, who recently had surgery on her back, and I'll let her tell the story. But I hope these videos are an encouragement to you. The goal of what we're doing here is to encourage you in your prayer life and your faith, to see that God answers prayers. And in this situation, and sometimes God is answering prayers in ways that we don't even know what to pray for, what to ask for. And so I hope that you're continuing in prayer and to grow in faith in these days. So Tara, tell us about your just the back surgery, how you got there, and the first couple steps of that.
Sure. So I've had ongoing back issues for most of my adult life. I've already fused at 2 levels in my lower lumbar. So when I was faced with the prospect of having surgery again, it seemed kind of like a no-brainer to me. Like, we've been here before. This won't be as major as the first time. And so we probably weren't, I say we, Jim and me, weren't probably as prepared for all of the work that the surgeon was going to do. But on June the 18th, I was at Piedmont Hospital, and Jim sent me on my way to the operating room, and I actually had 2 surgeries in one. I had a laminectomy in my lower lumbar where they just shave a bulging disc. She also removed some bone there, and she would go on to use that in my upper back in the thoracic area, where she would do some laminectomies and some other work there. She tied off some nerves to try to help with the ongoing pain that I was having there. So I'm numb sort of around my back, all the way to the front now on the left side. And then she also fused partially 3 levels. And so she used some of that bone from the lumbar laminectomy. So it ended up being a pretty major deal. However, I came home and was getting along pretty well, I thought at least, and I was walking back in the neighborhood. Jim and I are avid walkers, and doing all the things that I thought I was supposed to do. I went at 2 weeks for my suture removal, got a good report there, but then you don't see the surgeon again for another 4 weeks. So I was waiting for my 6-week surgery when things went a bit awry, which you'll recall because I called you weeping hysterically. But somewhere around the week of July the 22nd, I was sitting in the chair that I had kind of been living in for the past 6 weeks, and all of a sudden started with pain that honestly I couldn't even describe. I feel like I've been through a few things in my life surgically and medically, and it was just the most extreme pain I had ever felt. And so I worked via phone and via email with the physician's assistant at Piedmont. He was very responsive to me. He changed up my medication. Felt like at that time that an internal suture had ruptured, and that was the cause of my pain. And he kind of indicated, we're going to see you next week, and there's, other than managing your pain, there really isn't anything to do for that. It kind of just, rectifies itself. You just have to kind of muscle through it. So I tried really hard to do that, and I made it to my appointment on Wednesday, the 29th of July. And interestingly enough, 2 days before that, the incision that had literally been perfect, healing perfectly, to Jim started to look not right, and had sort of started to weep a little bit. And so we just knew things weren't right. Didn't know to the extent that they weren't right. And so I made it to my appointment, like I said, on Wednesday, and the PA walked in. He always sees me before the surgeon does, and he walked in and took one look at my back, kind of pushed on it, saw what I was doing, and he said, "I'm admitting you to the hospital." And he said, "Obviously, Dr. Johnson will be right back in to make sure that she's on board with that, but I have no doubt you're going across the street." And so we were shocked, I think Jim more than I, until it settled in that he was going to get a break from all the caretaking. And then he was like, okay, this might not be such a bad gig. And so literally the next hour was them admitting me to the hospital, so I didn't obviously go through the emergency room. I went direct admit. Jim went 2 doors down to CVS to buy me a phone charger because we had left home expecting for me to return home. He went another couple of doors down to Chick-fil-A and got me a Chick-fil-A sandwich because we didn't know what that was going to look like for the next
hospital food looks like. Yeah.
Right. So I ate my Chick-fil-A sandwich in the doctor's office waiting for them to send my instructions to the hospital. He literally drove me across the street and dropped me off curbside. And
he couldn't go inside.
He couldn't go step foot inside. And so the hardest call I made that day was to Lindy because of COVID. They had this Creative Arts Guild had delayed their recital for a couple of months, and the recital was that weekend. So this was Wednesday. So we knew the likelihood of me getting to see that live was not good, but we weren't sure what the next couple of days would look like. And she took it a little rough, and I still feel that was one of the hardest moments for sure.
Absolutely.
And so they admit me to the hospital, and I was, by that point, had not had any medicine. I mean, I've been taking medicine religiously every few hours to try to keep the pain at bay. For hours. I had not had it by the time I got into the hospital. They get me admitted and literally start running tests from the moment sort of my nurse walked in. My surgeon had ordered a battery of obviously blood work, blood cultures to start trying to find infection, and then imaging. In fact, they were so diligent, they rolled me out of my MRI at 11 o'clock that night, because she was convinced that if there was something she needed to do surgically, she wanted to do it the next day, which is one of her scheduled surgery days. Interestingly enough, all of that came back normal.
Okay.
And so she started me immediately on 2 very powerful antibiotics, even though the first testing showed no signs of infection. One of which was vancomycin, which is pretty potent, and means that they're checking you a lot during the day because they have to do what's called a vanc trough to make sure that your system is, they have to redose you every time to make sure your system doesn't become toxic with it. And so it's a drug I have a lot of experience with because of what my mom has gone through with battles with cellulitis. So there I was in the hospital, and it turned out to be not such a bad gig between Dilaudid and DoorDash. I made it through those days pretty well. But it was just me, and I talked to home a lot, and Jim made a run back to the hospital with a suitcase that he was able to leave at a designated spot, and they brought it up to me. So I was able to have an iPad, so I was able to watch Lindy and her recital. And Susan Beck went and took my ticket and sat in my seat so that she had a close friend, family member represented there for me, along with, of course, Jim and Pierce. And so I made it through the weekend. They kept, my doctor came in Thursday and said, I'm keeping you through the weekend. She confirmed that, but she also said two reasons. I'm still looking for infection, and I'm going to treat it. And secondly, I need to keep your pain managed, and they knew the only way they could do that was intravenously through the hospital. And I was grateful. I mean, I tried not to be downhearted that I was in the hospital away from family. I tried really hard to just be grateful for the treatment, because all the signs led nowhere. They didn't lead to that anything was wrong other than my horrible pain. And so in the meantime, wound care came in and took a look at my wound, and didn't like what they saw. It had, at the top, had started to work its way apart, and so it was not healing together. And so Monday rolls around, and Dr. Johnson walks in again and said, okay, you still test negative for everything. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what's wrong. I'm convinced you have infection, but none of the tests show it. And of course, again, keep in mind, she's been treating me for it. But I'm going in to see what it is. And I'm going to fix whatever's wrong. And the confidence of that, was so reassuring.
Yeah.
Even facing down a second surgery
Right.
in 6 weeks
Mm-hmm.
was certainly not ideal. But the Lord certainly gave me a peace about it, and He, part of that was through a very confident and compassionate surgeon.
Yeah.
And so, again, that next day on August the 4th, I was taken back to surgery. She found not one, but 2 ruptured sutures. And those sutures had really taken a toll on the tissue and had really made a mess of the layer of tissue between the skin and muscle. Fortunately, she did not have to cut through the muscle again, but she did have to clean up a lot. So I came through that surgery just fine. I was dismissed from the hospital on Thursday. The pinnacle, however, of the story.
Yeah, there's a twist.
There is a twist, and it's a beautiful one. After I got home and was recovering again from home, I got a call from her at about 5 o'clock on that Friday. So 5 o'clock on a Friday, directly from my surgeon. Inquiring, of course, how I was feeling, but also wanting me to know that when she was in there cleaning up everything and resuturing, she said, "Oh, I swabbed everything and, of course, sent it to lab. And I just needed to let you know that you were full of staph." And when you Google the treatment for staph, the second drug listed for treating staph aggressively is vancomycin. So for 8 days, my surgeon was treating an infection that no one could see, no one could verify that I had. And I just believe, again, a confident, compassionate surgeon that was responding, whether she knows it or not, I believe through the unction of the Holy Spirit, to bring about my healing. Because had staph run rampant, untreated for that long, obviously we all know it's a dangerous infection. And I have metal close to where that was, so that could have really potentially been dangerous and caused many more complications. And so I just believe the Lord in His mercy and His divine providence was working on my behalf long before any of us knew what the problem really was.
Yeah, and so you're a month or so out of a successful surgery.
Right. And
you go back to the hospital recognizing the severe pain is likely this ruptured suture, which it is too.
Right.
But then for 8 days you're treated for an infection that under a suspicion from the surgeon, and that's not a commercial for Piedmont Hospital or a surgeon, but it's an opportunity to praise God that obviously He knew what was going on inside your body, and He was providing and allowing you to be treated for the problem you didn't know you had.
Right.
And so what was we talked, I guess, before you went back to the hospital.
Right.
And that was the season of just extreme pain. What was it like in the hospital in terms of prayer and because when we talked, there was some encouragement that came after our one conversation, but tell us a little bit more about what your relationship was with Christ in that hospital.
Sure.
For a week or so.
If I may, I would love to share my moved again. The morning after I spoke to you, I was still trying to do my daily devotion, even though I was, of course, severely distracted by pain. But the morning after I talked to you, I knew that you and others had been praying for me because I was able to get a little bit of rest, which the first night, when it suddenly happened, that those acute symptoms happened, I paced the floors that first night. And so I was already feeling grateful, even though I was still in a tremendous amount of pain, but I had been able to rest a little bit. And I was on the couch. For some reason, I could get comfortable there where I couldn't in the bed. And I was to the point again where I was having to have help even getting up.
Yeah.
Whereas I had been way past that,
Right.
just days before. Yeah. And so my devotion read this on that morning that I have to share. And it says, "Our lives are not haphazard. We are not victims of chance, chaos, tough luck, or bad timing. We can live in peace even in troubled times because our days are ordered by an almighty God who loves us. The more you get to know God, the sweeter and sweeter your relationship with him will become. His plans for you are good. You are loved and not forgotten. He knows exactly where you are, even in a little recliner at my house in pain, and will continue to be the architect of your divinely ordered life." Yeah. And Tim, what that told me that I already knew, but that I needed reminded of, was that ruptured sutures didn't come as a surprise to him. And the following days, myself and my family faced, it didn't come as a surprise to him.
Yeah.
He knew about those days before he knitted me in my mother's womb, before he created me in his image.
Yeah.
And those were the thoughts that I kept close during those days, that chaos isn't from the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think too, since then, and as I've continued to heal and done very well since the second surgery, even though, it sent me back completely in recovery in terms of stamina and all of that, what a beautiful promise that is for 2020. I mean, this year has been nothing if not chaos.
Yeah.
And so the Lord has used what happened to me physically through this time with my surgeries to just remind me that he's already seeing it.
Yeah. He hasn't left us.
That's
it's
right.
not haphazard. It's, we do not understand what he is doing behind
That's right.
the scenes in the same way we didn't understand the significance of 8 days of antibiotic before the discovery of a staph infection.
Right.
And so what an encouragement to hold on to Christ in these days, whether it's for a medical issue or just looking at the events of our day and the crises that we all face. So
absolutely, he is working all things out for our good, for my good, and he loves us and he's good.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. That's a beautiful story, and I hope it encourages you all. And we have a few of these already, and we're going to keep doing more, just as an encouragement to people in the midst of trial that we all face. So, praying for you guys this week, and I'm praying that you will hold fast to Christ in the midst of trial. Thanks, Tara.
Thanks.